Really?
Good morning. Welcome to episode 78 of the Coffee Squad podcast. Today we're talking about cryptocurrency with Alec and Charles. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
What's going on, fellas?
Going back to right before we got cut off, it's actually not bad. It's a little sweet, but they've got another version out I haven't had that's not supposed to be as sweet. So,
Okay.
anyways, yeah. Back to Alec and Charles. Alec is the man. He's joined us before. We're talking about infrastructure hacking, so he's back. He's the managing director of Halo Privacy. He focuses on secure communications, identity and reputation management, investigations, enhanced privacy services. He is a cryptocurrency enthusiast with a particular interest in Bitcoin and Monero, which hopefully we'll find out more about today, and the co-host of the Crypto Voices podcast. Charles is the founder of Black Hand Solutions, a cryptocurrency-focused special investigations company. For his day job, he is the Insider Threat Program. He leads the Insider Threat Program at Tesla. And prior to joining Tesla in 2019, he worked for 18 years as an operations officer for the. Can I say that, Charles? Am I allowed to?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get redacted or anything. The CIA's National Clandestine Services, and he has been actively involved in cryptocurrency since 2017.
Don't worry, Will. After you just put that out in the air, the black helicopter was showing up in a little bit, man, and whisk you away. But that's all right.
I'm not far from Lejeune, so I don't know how that works.
Way to give me your location too, man. I just made it easy.
You don't think they already know?
Yeah, well,
I've had my shot. Isn't there trackers? No.
So, guys, I got to tell you, we kind of talked about this a little bit before the show. I'm super stoked about this episode. Literally, it's cryptocurrency. Alec, we've kind of talked a little bit before when you're here. A good buddy of ours, Paul, but I want to know more. And so maybe for our listeners and viewers out there, you're like, why the hell are you guys talking about cryptocurrency? Well, because there's some scary stuff, and it's just cool to know, in my opinion. And so maybe this isn't for you today. Maybe it's more for me and Will and some of our other listeners out there with cryptocurrency. But I'm super stoked to learn more about cryptocurrency, and hopefully I'm not throwing my money away. If you're listening, I've bought into your spiel, so hopefully it's paying off.
Nice. So you have skin in the game now?
I do, just a little. Each month I'm putting a little in. But yeah, it's
yeah. Well, Charles, go ahead, Will.
I was gonna say I just haven't had the fortitude, I guess, to pull the trigger on that one. I keep looking at it. I have everything. I follow it. And I just keep hemming and hawing. I just need maybe after this episode it'll push me over the edge to finally invest.
I mean, I think a small amount, whatever that is, that was a turning point for me because, a couple of years back, I was interested in crypto. We started using it at work. I was trying to read, it has its own news cycle and its own blogs and its own language and all its own personalities. And a lot of people are pseudonymous and it's weird, right? And so I was trying to follow it, and it's like picking up on a TV show right in the middle, and it's just kind of hard until you give it time. But then, one day I was just like, all right, I'm going to put $200 in. And then I was interested, right? Then the price moves mattered to me. And then these, protocol changes that were being proposed that suddenly took on some actual meaning to me. And that was kind of like a turning point in my interest. And so, and I think Charles and I have talked about this many times, right? You don't have to put the kids' college fund or your life savings in, but a little bit in, it was enough to get me interested in a way that it created the beginnings of that rabbit hole. And once you're in that, it's so interesting. It's hard to get out. It's been referred to, I forget, I think there's this guy, Marco Santori, who's an attorney who went from traditional legal, law firm, super stuffy into the crypto world. And he refers to it as a mind virus. So once you kind of get in with that crypto stuff, it just starts, because you have to talk about cryptography, and you have to talk about distributed systems, and you have to talk about economics, and you have to talk about policy, and you have to talk about game theory, and there's all these components, and each one of them is interesting. And so that's ultimately what happened to me, was just kind of started getting interesting because we were using it at work for attribution management and payment mechanisms, and then it just became a whole thing, and never really looked back.
And for me too, just to sort of pile on what Alex said there, look, cryptocurrency is better experienced than explained. we can sit here and talk about it. We can sit here and tell you about all the different aspects of it. But at the end of the day, until you get some skin in the game and actually physically move it around and get those sweaty palms the first time you send money between one wallet and another one, because crypto's the ultimate big boy currency. There's no third parties out there. It's just you. If you lose your keys, if you do it wrongly, your money's gone. And for some people, that feels great. And for other people, that's really scary. As a non-nanny state kind of guy myself, I bet on myself. I like myself. I like first-party risk rather than third-party risk. And the other bit, I'll just jump on what Alex said. You definitely shouldn't put your kid's college fund in it. But my super old and sweet and lovely mom saves $50 a month for my son's college fund. And then every year she gives it to us like $600. And, you know, previously I'd put it in my 529 for my kid. Well, about 4 years ago, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this money and I'm going to buy 0.1 Bitcoin with it. And I did it for my niece and my nephew as well. So everybody had 0.1 Bitcoin. And this was $600 bought 0.1 Bitcoin. I'll let you do the math on when we bought it. Mm-hmm. So now that 0.1 Bitcoin as of this morning is worth about $5,000. So that $600 that my mom would have spent, $5,000. Now, here's the saddest part. It was down for a long time. And so when it got back up to even, I told my parents, I said, hey, do you want to leave the money in for the niece and nephew, or do you want to take it back out and get your money back? Oh, I don't know. Let's take it back out and get your money back. Roger that. Gave it back to them. They were whole. I think there's even I threw a couple $100 on there just for the price of playing. And they're out. But I kept my son in, and of course now it's 5x or 10x or whatever it was when we put it in. So
wow.
I don't like cryptocurrency necessarily for investment because I'm a believer in the fact of it disrupting the traditional financial system and used as a monetary instrument or currency. But while you're waiting for it to be mass adopted, it doesn't hurt that it's generally in a long trend on an upward slope.
Yeah.
Well, so I have a 529, and now you just gave me a brilliant idea. It'll be either brilliant or a horrible idea, and my wife may crush my balls later for it. But my 529 doesn't do a whole lot. I've had it for, I think I did it in 2015 for my two boys and then my third. And I think I started off with like 2,500, and then kind of like your parents, Charles, like just, every year put $500-$600 into it, but it's just is like, meh, flatline. So I'm going to take a gamble after this show.
And it's the other part too, I would say, investing in let's call it investing now, investing in cryptocurrency will really skew your view of the traditional stock market, right? People get all worked up when their stock moves 1% or 2%. Mm-hmm. And you're hoping for that 10% a year in traditional stocks. Crypto, it moves 10% in a day, 10% in an hour. And so now when I look at my traditional portfolio, I'm a little more balanced about it because I don't get really worked up if it's up a little bit or down a little bit. Crypto, holy smokes, you're on top.
It's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, it's different.
So let's before we really get too deep into this, why don't you guys explain exactly what cryptocurrency is to layman's terms? Go, people like me, I'm not very familiar with it. I know a little bit, just enough to make me dangerous, I think. But can you explain kind of what it is and what a wallet and blockchain and just the general terminology that you should kind of know before you really dive into this?
Yeah, do you want me to take it or Charles?
Yeah, go ahead, Alec.
Yeah, all right. So what is crypto? We have a couple hours, right? Is that?
I do this in about a week usually, but go ahead.
So underlying cryptocurrency is a not particularly novel technology called blockchain. And blockchain is really just a big distributed database. And so it doesn't have to be distributed, but in the sense of like cryptocurrencies, the distribution of it is part of the redundancy and it's part of the security because no one entity controls the entire history or the validation of transactions. And so the more copies, the more replication you have of that blockchain. And the way it's replicated is on what's called a full node. And I run a full node. Anyone can run a full node, right? Like I'm not super technical. I actually just bought one from a company called Nodl, and they ship it to you, and then you just plug it in, and you could, go through like deploying the code yourself too if you're a little bit more technically proficient. But it's not like this thing that is unachievable. But then you have a copy of the entire blockchain history locally, and every time a new block is proposed, and it's proposed by miners, and miners propose blocks by solving a really difficult math problem. And that difficult math problem is only solved by applying enough brute force computing power. And so brute force computing power, this is where you see those pictures of like the huge server farms in Iceland, and China doesn't have it anymore, but there used to be a lot in China. There's a lot that's repatriating here to the US, and they're literally just rig after rig after rig, row after row after row of computers trying to solve a single problem. And the solution to that problem is called a nonce. And once that nonce is solved for, that block is considered mined. And so there'll be transactions in that block. So Charles is going to send me 1 Bitcoin, and go ahead and do that now. And among other transactions, those will be proposed in that block. Then all of the other nodes, so all of the other participants, will be able to look at that block and say, hey, is this an honest block? Is every transaction in this block valid? Or is there a transaction in here that is invalid? And an example of an invalid transaction would be, hey, Charles sent me 1 Bitcoin, but he had also sent that Bitcoin to Jake, 10 minutes before as well. And so the validation of that transaction is to look, hey, make sure that has never been spent before. It's not a double spend. And there's other kinds of invalid transactions, but that's kind of the most common one. And so if all the nodes agree, hey, that's an honest block, then they will add it to their personal copy of the blockchain. And then the miners go back and they continue to mine, and they'll find a new one, and then new transactions will be in it, and so on and so on. And so what ends up happening is you have a long history of transactions going back to the original block, which is called the Genesis block. And in that history of transactions, you have the entire participation in the network. Every transaction that ever occurred between any 2 wallet addresses is in that history. And so anyone can validate, check, store, and issue, not issue, but propose transactions in the future against that history. Because if Charles says he sent me a Bitcoin, and now I have it, and I propose I want to send that Bitcoin to Will, then you would just go back and look at the history and say, yep, that happened. Charles sent it to me. Now I have the ability to send it to Will. So that's kind of the blockchain side. The user side, which is what we experience more often, is done through wallets. And wallets, not to be confused with wallet addresses. So a wallet would be something like Samurai or Wasabi. I like those two because those are more privacy accruing, but there's tons of them. Exodus, there's literally hundreds of them. And a wallet is kind of like a browser for the blockchain, and it allows you to interface with your transactions. And then a wallet address is a long string of random numbers that is basically your public key that allows you to receive and send transactions. So that's kind of overly simplified, but that's what the technology is behind it. And
I wish everyone could see my face. Right
yeah, mine too.
Alex, like,
all right,
super
Alec,
simple, man.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
One of the reasons I love working with Alec is he is brilliant. Man, the last time we were together on a panel, there's like 3 words that he used I had to look up later. And I didn't know whether he said, one thing, and I didn't know whether to fight him or thank him. He's just brilliant. And he gives a really precise, correct definition of it. So any of the people out there that are super technical and are into the space are going to love that, because what he said is absolutely correct. Now, I'm an old farm kid from Ohio, not overly encumbered by education or intelligence. So I'm going to give you the 95% description of it that is like the Reader's Digest version.
Can you do like the knuckle dragger, like Marine type version?
Yeah.
Man? I was a great Marine weapons guy.
The crayon eater, yeah.
Look, as a Navy guy,
we used to jump out of airplanes voluntarily. Okay, you gotta.
As a Navy guy, you say Marine, so I'm gonna have to get my crayons out. But let me do the best I can here. When you think of Bitcoin, think of currency, right? Bitcoin had all the hallmarks of currency: a store of value, a medium of transfer, all those good stuff that you think about a dollar. The difference between something like Bitcoin, and I'm going to use Bitcoin generically to talk about cryptocurrency, although there's like 6,000 different types of cryptocurrency. But we can really go into let's think about Bitcoin right now. Bitcoin is like a dollar, except it's not issued by a central government. It was created in 2009, 2008. First block was mined in 2009. Someone made, Satoshi Nakamoto. And we could argue about who we think that is. I think that's a fun conversation. As a currency that wasn't created by a central government, wasn't controlled by a central government. It is controlled by a mathematical algorithm that Alec described there. So basically, math is the underpinning of this, not the Fed, not the EU, not the Chinese government, no government, no nothing like that. It's just math. Now, if you ask me, how do you know the math is good behind it? I don't know, man. People a lot smarter than me have looked at it and said, yep, that makes sense. So when you hear cryptocurrency, just think currency. It's just a way to buy and sell things, or it's a way to invest in it like a foreign currency. If you're into foreign currency investing, that you can try to, gain when make money when the currency goes up. Blockchain is just nothing but, Alec had a really good description of it, and that's absolutely accurate. For me, blockchain's a ledger. It's just like your old bank book back home that says, you have this much in it, and you have a transaction that this much is gone. Now you have this much left. That's it. It's super complicated, and there's all kinds of really cool things that you can do with blockchain that are going to change the world, the way that we do everything from storing information securely to all that. But at the end of the day, blockchain is just a ledger. Wallet is, we use a lot of these terms to mean sort of the same thing, although the nuance of it is none of them mean the same thing, but we use them the same. So your wallet is where you store your cryptocurrency, but it's not really where you store your cryptocurrency. It's where you store the keys to it that gives you access to it on the blockchain. But for the layperson, wallet's where you have your cryptocurrency, like the wallet in your pocket. So Bitcoin, currency. Blockchain, ledger that keeps track of who's got what. Wallet, where you store that cryptocurrency or the access to it, the keys to it for the blockchain. How's that for a little more? And there's some nuance that we missed. And if you want to hear
what I just said,
that's exactly what Alex. I just said what Alex just said.
You know what it is, Alec? Like, I don't know if everyone here is married or was married, or it's like having a girlfriend, whatever. At some point in time, like I've literally explained to my wife certain things, and she looks at me like I have. I'm trying to think of a proper term. Right
a tentacle growing out of your forehead.
There you go, a tentacle growing out of my forehead. I got you, Jake. Right? And it's like, and then someone else, like my buddy, will explain it to her. I'm like, I said the same freaking thing. Like, are you kidding me? She's like, well, he explained it better. I'm like, okay. So
I love that because better for me is simpler. Like better for me is like less accurate, but more understandable, even if it's not completely accurate. But Alex said the same thing.
Yeah. So Cardano. So, Paul. Cardano. Paul's.
No, we're not doing that on the show.
But anyways, so I started looking at Cardano, right? Just because that was Paul. And so, like you guys both said, right? Like we can talk about this stuff all day. And if it's interesting to you, great, grab it, run with it. If you're kind of interested, and then like, for me, it's been a slow. I've always been told, like, don't invest unless you're comfortable with it. And now I'm finally comfortable with it because talking to so many people, and what really made me comfortable was just doing it, putting a little in and like, okay, I'm somewhat understanding how this works. Your guys' descriptions, Alec and Charles, like, it's like, boom, the light bulb went off. Like, okay, I got this a little bit. I understand a little bit more clear. So we're not going to talk about Cardano. Don't worry. But
look, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger would say, never invest in something you don't understand. If you wait until you completely understand what's going on in this space, you're never going to get there. Because it's kind of like, for me, the closest equivalent is we'll never send an email until you understand exactly how the internet works. Well, in that case, I'm never going to send an email.
Yeah.
But I know how to send an email. I know how to generally find my emails. I don't need to know about how all the protocols work behind it and what goes through where and where. It makes my head hurt.
Well, this is the problem with crypto, right? Is that it's even now still seems like foreign and challenging to users, and it's way better than it was 5 years ago, and way better than it was 10 years ago. And so, like, yeah, it's cool. There's a whole crew of like cryptographers and cypherpunks that are all like foaming at the mouth about disintermediation and decentralized systems. But the reality is, like, until it's super easy for just like anyone to use it, then we have a ways to go. And I think there's been massive improvements on that front. Like, there's a Cash App which you can download, and you can just buy Bitcoin in there and link it to your bank account. And it's like one button, push. Or Abra is another version of that. PayPal has crypto behind it. Venmo is using crypto as a payment rail in the background. So these things are making it like app-based and simpler for kind of the average listener. But there's still a whole bunch of complexity there that there is some of the community, and hopefully I'm not part of it, that just sort of seems to think that you need to be technically versed in it to be a member of that community, and it's really not true.
Well, and for me, that just as Alec mentioned, three things are preventing adoption. One, slick user interface. If I had to buy stock by going into a super complicated algorithmic trading I'd never do it, right? But you go into your Vanguard account and you click a button, and now you're invested in the S&P 500. So the user interface is one. Clear regulation is two. The government still hasn't given us clear regulation on how to handle it with sensible taxes, know your customer, all the other things about regulation on it that make it really complicated still. And three is just broad education. Our financial system works, our bank works. We don't have to do it. A lot of countries in the world, none of those two statements aren't true, and so they have to adopt it. Mm-hmm. So those three things are one of the things that are slowing wider spread adoption. The other thing I would say on the other side of it, three elements of cryptocurrency make it really complicated to understand. One, to really understand it, you've got to understand really highfalutin technical terminology, computer science, cryptography, things like that. And every once in a while, I like to throw in elliptic curve cryptography, not because I know what it means. It just sounds fancy. So you've got to know this really highfalutin language of computer science. Second, you've got to know highfalutin language of international finance, because when you talk about disintermediation, you talk about correspondent banking, you talk about all the financial underpinnings of it. You have to understand that. And then just when you've been able to master those two lexicons of really complicated things, now there's the third leg, and that's just all the made up language, where it's like Klingon or Elven or something like that. It's like the Fed meets Star Trek, where we're just going to make some stuff up. And so now we come up with terms like HODL. What the heck does HODL mean? Well, HODL means way back in the day, someone was hammered and the price of it was going down on a call. And he's like, I'm HODLing, because he couldn't spell hold. And now that's a term. Now you're a hodler. And that's just one example of, what do we have this, the new one, the Mimblewimble cryptography that's based off a Harry Potter term. But all this crazy stuff that you're like, I can't find this in the old Oxford, or the old English dictionary here, the Oxford English Dictionary. What does this mean? So my general pitch to people is, don't get worked up about it. Think about it in the simplest terms you can. Put some skin in the game, move it around, and you'll learn as you go.
So I guess I have a question, because back in 2017, I had an opportunity to invest some money in Bitcoin, and I wasn't comfortable with it. And now I'm looking at what it is then. It was $1,000 a share, and right now it's up to $50,000 a share. So I kind of kick myself, for not investing in it back then. But how secure is it? How safe is it? And I don't know, how stable, secure, and safe is it? That's kind of my 3-part question there.
So I can talk about security. Well, I got news for you. It's not stable if you're talking about price, and it won't be for a long time. But the security, first of all, price is a reflection of the security, and there's a reason for that. So security is created by the miners, right? They put all that hash power in, and that's the computational power that's securing the network. And it's the largest distributed computer in the world. And like the NSA's computers and Google's computers and the large computers that are at the national labs, they aren't even like close to being the size of the hash power of the Bitcoin network. Not even close. If you put them all together, they might be like 1% of what the Bitcoin network has. So the hash power there is absolutely incredible, and that's what's securing the network. And so if someone was to try to attack Bitcoin, they would have to have more computational power than 51% of that network. So basically no one has it. It'd be very, very difficult to try to directly attack Bitcoin. Where you have security issues are in people handling keys or handing over coins to a custodial exchange that's trying to secure things for them, or they're using an insecure computer when they're transacting with Bitcoin. Like that's where the attacks occur. Or it's just plain old social engineering, where someone pretends like they've got a great deal. And they're like, hey, if you give me 1 Bitcoin, I'm going to give you 0.1 Bitcoin every day for a week. And you're going to be in the silver program and you're going to be super happy. And poof, your Bitcoin's gone and you don't get any of it. Those are the security risks, but the actual network itself is secure. Now, as you go down the list of other cryptocurrencies, they all have less hash power or less security. And it's not all done by hash power, but just for argument's sake, they all have less security than Bitcoin. If you get down the list to like the 100th coin on the list, those are fairly easily attacked, but there's not a lot of attention on them. So, the bad guys aren't going to spend a bunch of money and time trying to attack the 100th coin on a list. And the top ones, they have their own security. So on the security front, I think it's good if you're talking about transactional security, and there's ways to go if you're talking about kind of user security.
Yep. And I would just add on that. Technically, it's super secure. From a liberal arts perspective, if someone successfully attacked the Bitcoin protocol, which, as Alec explained, it's impossible, or it's not, nothing's impossible, but it's highly implausible. And the secondary correlation to that is, if someone successfully attacked the protocol, the value of Bitcoin would drop so precipitously that they would have stolen the keys to an empty room. So, so the technology itself, very secure. But one of the things that a lot of us really appreciate about it, it takes out third-party risk, right? If I put my money in a bank, I have to trust the bank to do that. There's a lot of people that I have to trust in the traditional financial system. In Bitcoin, that trust gets put onto you. So is it secure? Well, I don't know. How responsible are you with your technology? How many stories have you heard that break your heart where someone says, man, I bought 100 Bitcoin in 2004 and it was worth 50 cents now and it would be worth $1 gazillion now, and I threw away my laptop, or I lost my keys, or it's big boy rules. You lose your keys, you lose your access, there's no getting it back. And that's part of the overall security of the protocol. But a lot of people just aren't up for that big boy ride.
So when you say keys, can you explain that to like someone who's, what is a key?
Yeah, so let's look at it. Okay, let me use a bit of a phrase here, right? So thinking in terms of what secures it is cryptography. What you need for cryptography is keys. 2 keys: public key, private key. For your consideration, you've got a beautiful house, right? You've got your house keys. Well, there's no windows, there's no garage door, there's no way to jimmy your way in it. You've got to have the keys to open that door. If you lose the key to that house, it's gone. No one can get in that. Now, the cool thing is no one can get in that house. Now that house is just going to sit empty. It's one of the reasons why when we say how many Bitcoin are out there, well, probably 2 to 3 million Bitcoin have been lost over time. Because when people own them and they didn't have much value, maybe your hard drive was worth actually more than the Bitcoin that was on it. So you wipe that hard drive and you download your latest, Pornhub video. Well, choke yourself, because now millions and millions of dollars worth that you've lost. So when you think of keys, there's a little more of a complicated explanation for keys and how it accesses the value on the blockchain. But just think in terms of house, front door key, couple of key versions. You save them. No one else saves them for you if you're doing it right.
So there's a key, a hard drive. Thumb drive.
Alec, do you want to take a shot at
so the key is the one and only way to prove that you have control of that coin or those coins.
So how do you store that key or keep that key? What is that key?
Yeah, so usually a wallet will basically have some key management in it, and it'll create a more human readable experience. So it'll give you what's referred to as what's the phrase called again? I'm blanking on it. Basically gives you a phrase of like a list of 26 random words.
Phrase.
Yeah, the seed phrase, right. And so that represents the private key, and the private key behind it is actually like, a super long string of random numbers and letters. But they give you words, and then you just kind of manage those words, and you have to protect those. You put them in your password. Yeah, it's up to you, right? So there's tools out there that'll do it for you. You can put it in your password manager. You can literally use like what's called crypto steel and engrave it into a steel plate. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Some people, there's something called a paper wallet, which is literally just putting it on a piece of paper and putting that in a safe. Now that sounds super flimsy, right? But there's an advantage to those offline wallets, and that those keys are not digitally stored anywhere that is online. And so that's why people would put it on steel or paper or something that's outside the digital world. But you also have that is a bearer asset, right? So if your house burns down, tough, right? Like you just lost your keys.
So what do you two recommend?
So it's interesting. There's a school solution that makes it the safest, and then there's the normal person solution that makes it the safest from them. So I'll tell you right now, if you're a really savvy person and you've got a significant amount of money in it, you download it on a hardware wallet, which you would look at and say, well, that looks like a USB. That's exactly it. It's a USB with software on it that stores that super long alphanumeric code that is your key, that's represented by things that are easier for a human to remember and process. So that's the school solution. Maybe you'd even download it on a paper wallet. You would split the keys up and put them in safe deposit boxes, all that stuff. Everything, it's the old cross there of you're trading ease for security. Now, sliding up the chain, and this is what I do with a lot of my clients that are new to it. You can buy cryptocurrency and leave it on your wallet on the exchange. That's the least safe place to save it. Because if the exchange is hacked and your crypto is stolen from there, it's gone. And then there's other wallets that come down, right? You can save it on a software wallet on your phone. You can save it it's a mobile wallet. You can save it on a desktop wallet. That's a piece of software on your desktop computer. You can save it on a hardware wallet. You can save it on a paper wallet. All these different ways, but it depends on what you want it for. Is this, you're not going to touch it for 10 years because you want to write it up? Is this, you want to use it to buy a cup of Starbucks coffee, in which case a paper wallet wouldn't be useful. You'd want it on your phone. So there's lots of different ways. My recommendation is, it's the galactic. It depends. How comfortable are you with it? Make sure whatever method you use, you can understand, and it's safe enough that it's safe, but is protecting from your own likelihood of losing the keys.
So I guess,
yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Someone like me, right? Not very tech savvy, not the smartest tool in the shed there. I would probably use that USB type drive and have it like hard, put in my safe. That way I kind of have both. I've had hard drives crash on me before and unrecoverable. That was probably like back in 2012, 13. Hard drives are getting a lot better. But that's good to know,
So the piece behind that, and this is what Alec was referring to when he talked about the seed phrase. So let's say you use a USB wallet or a hard wallet, a Trezor or a Nano Ledger S or something like that. It comes with like a 21 or 24 word passcode that you can use to reestablish those keys. So let's say I've got a hardware wallet. My kid puts it in the VCR or whatever kids do these days.
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing anymore. But yeah,
probably not.
It's showing our age. It's all right. I understand it.
We all know what you're talking about.
Appreciate it. So as long as I've got that recovery phrase saved somewhere, I can buy another hard drive. I can reload those keys into the hard drive, and I don't lose the value of my coin. And that's why there's that little bit of nuance. It's not like $100 bills in your wallet that if it flies in the fire, it's gone. You can reestablish it. Now, one of my favorite stories, and I'll just say the Bureau because, I love the Bureau, but, as a former CIA guy, I like to also, got a first cousins, all that stuff. I think it may have been DHS or DEA, but I'll say the Bureau for this case, right? So the Bureau seizes a hardware wallet with hundreds of thousands of dollars of value of coin on it. It's in their evidence locker. They're high-fiving each other. Everything's great. Well, what they don't realize is the criminal's wife has got the seed phrase. And so she buys another hardware wallet. She downloads the keys, moves the value to this new wallet. And now the FBI's got $79 worth of a USB in their evidence locker, no funds. So, again, that's where you could sit there with your hardware wallet in your safe and be like, I am awesome, man. But you're a moron and you've written your seed phrase on a sticky and someone's came in and grabbed it. And now they've been able to steal your coins. Yeah. So I would flip that back to the question before. Is that a secure system or not? The technology's right.
Yeah.
How good are you?
It's like any other technology. It's just as good as human, as a human error will allow
there it is.
I mean, so write your password on your desk, right to your computer. And I can't tell you how many office buildings I've gone in, Fortune 500 companies. You're walking through the lawyer's offices and you see their password like stuck on their screen, like, good job. So, so that makes sense. And I think to your point, right? So I get this question and, when we're doing the counterterrorism type stuff, terrorists and drug dealers, they're using cryptocurrency and kind of put a bad spotlight, like a negative spotlight, like on it.
Stigma on it.
And then, think about, they also use the banking system as well. Wells Fargo got busted for, doing money with Hamas and other stuff. And, other banks, criminals are smart. They're going to use the same systems we're using. They just know how to exploit them. And so,
look, and cryptocurrency, like all the other things you mentioned, is value agnostic. Right. Ransomware actors use the internet to deliver their ransomware. So is the internet bad? Should we turn that off?
Yeah.
Drug dealers use the $100 bill. Is the $100 bill bad? No. You can use cryptocurrency to build a hospital. You can use cryptocurrency to buy explosives to blow up a hospital. It's all depends on how it's used.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like not blowing up hospitals. So let's talk about like third.
Where are we going, Jake? Right? Where are you doing?
No, I've gotten in trouble for getting a gunfight in the hospital, but we won't go there. Let's talk about. We'll edit that part out. Let's talk about third world countries and why. And this is really what, to me, kind of like, I think was that shining moment of like, holy crap, you're totally right. I think Western society, the centralized government prints the money, holds onto the money. You have banks that are federally insured. We don't understand the ease of just swiping our ATM card and getting money out, direct deposit into our banking accounts. I mean, shoot, I joined the Army in 2004. And before you joined, you had to have like a bank account set up so they could electronically, deposit your checks. Well, that's not the rest of the world out there. The majority of the world I've been to, there really isn't a bank, or if there is a bank, it's in a major city. And only the wealthy really have access to that. And everyone else is a trade barter system. And then how are you going to buy a house? So if you guys could kind of talk about, I guess, the pros of cryptocurrency, where it's more of a global usage.
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of long-winded. Sorry about that.
No, this is super important, right? So in my office, I keep a 1 Zimbabwe dollar note and 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar note. And those two notes were issued within like 2 years of each other, right? So we have inflation problems in the US and maybe we'll have more, but we're nowhere near that scale. And like Iran's had these issues, Venezuela's had these issues. You know, the average age of a currency, I think, is 26 years. The average life of a currency is 26 years. So currencies, you know, they come and go, they don't last. They're only as strong as the regime behind them. And so in the US, we have fairly strong and reliable banking systems, but actually most of the world doesn't. If you're not, you know, on the EU or on the euro or the yen or, you know, the yuan or the dollar, your currency is kind of either pegged to something else or it fluctuates a lot. And so if you are somewhere where you don't have a lot of financial resources and the value of your currency is unreliable and unstable and trends towards inflation, then a disinflationary hedge like a Bitcoin is actually really useful to you. And add to that it's borderless. And so as you have migrant workers who are traveling around the world and potentially, you know, away from their families trying to create wealth to send back to their country, then you have rent seekers along the way, traditionally like MoneyGram, who are taking little pieces of that. And as a proportion of these small amounts of money, those little pieces, it might be $8, right? But that might be like 4% of the amount of that transaction. These things get really expensive. And so it's not that cryptocurrency is free, right? But those transaction fees in the crypto world, those are the fees you pay just to participate in the network. They're not the fees that you pay to bankers and ATMs and all of the little like rent seekers along the way. And so that's why crypto is super valuable to people in parts of the world where they don't have a reliable central bank and they don't have money that has a value that is predictable. And they might have a future of their fiat currency that is entirely sort of dark, right? Like if half of the world knew that their currency was going to be removed or replaced or devalued by whoever was in charge next, they would be very interested in crypto. And this is why we see like, for instance, East and West Africa have a really high cryptocurrency adoption rate as a percentage of their population. And because this is the same thing that happened with mobile phones, right? They kind of skipped over the landline phone world and they went straight to mobile. And they went into things like mobile money, like M-Pesa. And so this kind of like mobile transactional form of money that is outside of the banking system is really appealing to them. And I think we're going to see countries like El Salvador did move towards using cryptocurrency as part of a actually accepted currency in their country. And they were the first one, but they won't be the last.
Well, I know the U.S. is some of the companies. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charles.
Well, no. I was just going to say, if I could just add, Alec is absolutely correct. And if I can just add to that, I think one of the hardest parts of explaining this to Americans is because our dollar and our financial system works so well. Now, we could argue about the Fed's, you know, devaluation and debasement of the U.S. dollar by just printing dollars out like, you know, like it doesn't matter. But, you know, I think at one point there were 40 or 50 other countries where you could look at with the rate of inflation, the value of their currency was just being degraded. Yeah. Now, let's add to it that the banks don't work. You have to pay money to store money in a bank. You don't know if you store money in a bank if it's going to be there. There was the perfect example out of Cyprus a handful of years ago where the government had a massive deficit. Well, what they did, you wake up that morning and now everyone who's got money saved in a bank account is going to get a 10% haircut.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what's that now?
Yeah.
Let's jump to today. You just saw the announcement out of Afghanistan a couple of days ago where the banks in Afghanistan said you can only withdraw $200 at a time once a week. Well, bullshit. That's my money. Why in the world can't I have access to my money? So things like that make people go, is there a better way? And that was Satoshi's vision for this was there is a better way. And that's why it really works. I get excited, man. When I was overseas, I had a little Filipina maid who was just lovely and awesome. And I paid her a really good salary. And then she'd have to trot down to the money exchanger and send that money back to the Philippines. And these bastards are sitting in the middle of it, taking 15, 20, 10% on one end, 10% on the 20 on the other end. Yep. She's working her fingers off. I mean, I employed her in a very fair way, but it's things like that that really, get me passionate about this from the ideological standpoint.
So for me, I love it, giving it to the man, right? Yeah. To big corporations, and so what I almost, see is how soon. I mean, we also already saw legislation trying to get pushed through on this last stimulus or economic package that they tried to push through, the 1.5 trillion. But at what point are the lobbying firms tied to these politicians in the baking industry going to say, hey, enough's enough, and they're going to go broke? Or are they going to get in compliance with the crypto side and say, look, we're almost in a losing battle almost. And so we either change and adopt to it, or, dirty tactics. I don't know. That's just speculation on my part.
Well, you see some countries like China, they're already making efforts to restrain the crypto trading and mining, right? So, and that's maybe because they're a dictatorship. I don't know why they're exactly doing it. Maybe Charles can or Alec can expand on that. But yeah, they can control it. So,
well, I think what we see happening in China, you have to understand. For me, you have to understand in the broader arc of the Chinese government system. They are reducing Bitcoin usage and any other crypto usage besides their central bank digital currency that they're adopting, the digital yuan. So one of the issues, for a lot of, legitimate historic reasons, the Chinese government favors stability and doesn't want to do things that are going to make things unstable. Well, part of the instability is capital flight from very wealthy people. Well, if they can't send it out any other way. Well, if you can transition it to Bitcoin, as we've talked about, there's no way to block that. So capital flight's one. Two, full consciousness about how people are spending their money. If you spend any time looking at the Chinese domestic political system, they're all about social stability and political stability. And so they've got this social credit score. Well, now, look, if I pay Alec $100 in cash, you don't know what I paid that for. You don't know that I paid it to him unless you're watching us or something like that. But if our money's digitized, if it's a digital central bank currency, now I pay it to him. It's kind of like Venmo. The silly people who do Venmo transactions and put a note about what it's for, I don't understand that. But that's what China's looking to do, where now I know every transaction. Who sent it to what for what? Maybe not know what, but I can piece that together. And now that information goes into this social credit score that the Chinese government is establishing for every citizen. So, hey, if you're using it to buy Chinese goods, great. If you're using it to donate to Falun Gong or to donate to the Uyghurs or to donate to the Dalai Lama, not so good. And now I've got the ability as a central government to not only monitor that, but now I can block it, freeze it, reverse it, do all these funky things. So when we talk about the way that the Chinese government's going to a central bank digital currency, there's a lot of socioeconomic and political things behind it. Just beyond, it gets oversimplified to they're moving away from cryptocurrency. And I would just boil that down to they're moving it away from cryptocurrency they don't control and have full visibility on. Yeah. Gotcha. They're moving it to a digital currency that they own and control and have full consciousness about, which is, I think, one of the most and I said this on a podcast with Alec a little bit ago. I think it's fascinating. Cryptocurrency, the perception pendulum, I think, is going to swing wildly from it's an anonymous cryptocurrency used by criminals to it is a totalitarian criminal used by governments to control people's spending and habits and things like that. And just because of the way I think that it potentially is going to be used by some of these countries, including that one you mentioned.
So let me just add to that. This is like the simplest, best argument for Bitcoin is the Chinese are so afraid of it that they banned it. I want everything I can have to do with that. That's great, right? Because the Chinese usually will just control something. And they looked at it and they had it for a while. They mined it. They allowed trading. They allowed their population to transact in it. And they were like, we can't control this. We can't put bounds on it. And so we got to ban it. So that to me means it works, right? That is the best endorsement for Bitcoin you could possibly have. That's the gold star of approval.
So I'm not asking for like your endorsements or anything, but is there a certain crypto like Bitcoin that you guys kind of say, yeah, that's probably the best one to invest in for a beginner? Or what is it, Dogecoin or lithium or something like that? There's a whole, I don't even know there's how many of them out there, hundreds of them probably.
6,000, 6,800 or more.
Yeah, there you go. So how do you know which one to kind of, yeah.
What's that, Alec?
Give some financial advice.
Oh yeah. On behalf of my good friend B, no, we always joke, right? We don't give financial, tax, or legal advice. Do your own research, consult professionals, all that good stuff.
Yeah. For
me, if you're new to the space, go with the big daddy. Bitcoin, is the rest of the market generally moves with Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So if you're just putting your toe in the water and you want broad exposure, Bitcoin is your gold. If you want secondary exposure to a different type that probably is going to catch up to Bitcoin, I think, maybe, then look at Ethereum. All the other projects, there's a lot of other projects that can make money quickly, but then you get into all this. Who controls it? What's the market cap? What's the volume? Is additional coins being created? Are additional coins being created? How fraudulent is it? You know, there's a lot of the smaller cap coins that are really susceptible to pump and dump scams. And so I'm not saying you can't make money doing it. Whether or not it's a good idea, don't know. Or wouldn't comment on it. But for me, if you're just getting started, go with the Big Daddy, because you don't have all these other things that are sort of going on behind the scenes that are going to screw you over, and you're not going to see it coming.
Yeah, and I would add to that. So, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. The first place to start is with Bitcoin. But if you're looking into the various protocols, the various cryptocurrencies, and you see something that has a why that you agree with, like that might be worth looking into a little more. And so for me, it's privacy coins. And there's a lot of them. And I think the king of them is Monero, but there's Zcash and Zen and Pirate Coin. There's probably 50 or 60 that are, even like known. And then there's probably a bunch of other junk that just rip-offs of those 50, 60. But that actually has a use case that means something to me, right? A privacy coin allows me to move money across a blockchain without really giving away a lot of information about it, about how much coin I have, about how much coin I moved, and about where I moved it to. And so that to me is like, hey, there's a use case. That's something. That's not just kind of some vaporware cool website marketing gimmick. And so I spend a lot of time on privacy coins. But to me, it's not really an investment thing. It's like an actual interest in that space. And yeah, they do tend to go up in value because I think other people look at that and like, oh, yeah, I get it. Like that's a thing. And some of the stuff is so weird and esoteric. It's like, digital identity on the blockchain, tied to like the motion of waves. I'm like, come on, there was a coin that was called Moon Coin that was based on the number of miles between the Earth and the Moon, and that's how many coins they issued. I mean, that's bullshit, but people still bought it, right? So, look for something that makes some kind of sense and start there. Would be my suggestion.
And Alec raised a really interesting point about privacy coins, and you're probably going to ask us about this, but let me just throw it out there real quick. People look at Bitcoin as a way to anonymously move money. I came to cryptocurrency when I was reading up on the Silk Road and the digital black market where they're selling guns and drugs and all that nasty stuff. And when I was reading up on that, I'm like, ooh, tell me about this magic anonymous internet money. This sounds interesting. For my previous life, it was useful to find ways to move money around that people didn't know about. But as I learned about it, what I realized from Bitcoin was, as we talked about the blockchain's ledger, Bitcoin transmits all transactions to the blockchain. So wallets, even if you don't know names, who sent it, or the wallet that sent it, the wallet that received it, the amount, and the date, right? So all that information is transmitted to the blockchain, to the ledger, and is there forever. So when people say that Bitcoin is anonymous, it's not. It's pseudo-anonymous, because as soon as I associate that wallet with Alec, well, now I can go back and see every transaction and all the people that Alec transacted with. Why is that important? One, because it's not anonymous. Two, for law enforcement, we want people using Bitcoin, because if it's on the blockchain, we can walk it back. If I hand you a bag full of $100 bills and you don't see it, it's gone. But if you do it on the blockchain, even if I don't see it today, if I find out about it 2 years from now, I can walk that back, which is incredible. Now, you could listen to that if you're a libertarian or if you like all the privacy features and say, well, that's scary as hell. And that would be an appropriate response. That's why we've got what's called privacy coins that encrypts that information that goes to the blockchain. So now you can't see that. I was in a wild chat with a guy named Fluffy Pony at one point from Monero, and which is the other thing, right?
Was it Alec? Alec, is that your name, Fluffy Pony?
Where else? I wish, right?
Where else in the world do you get to talk to someone named Fluffy Pony that's a hitter, a real player? And we were talking about why privacy coins are legit and why they're not. And his point, which is absolutely valid, well, would you put all of your bank account information online for anyone to see?
Yeah.
He goes, that's why we use privacy coins. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll buy that a little bit. But anyway, there's a couple of other aspects of it that, as you start to incorporate this into your life, and if you're just going to invest in it, doesn't matter. But if you're using it to, get off the grid, or if you're using it to reduce your profile, understand all the ramifications of it.
So I have a quick question. Maybe it's just my old school, I want something tangible I can see, or a head of a corporation I can blame something on if I need to. Like, who's in charge of this, right? Is there some mystery man puppet master out there controlling everything? Or,
Fluffy Bunny, bro.
No one. But
it's just out. Yeah,
Yeah, so these are open source projects, and Bitcoin, is probably the world's best known open source project. But it's not to say that there aren't people that have more of a say or influence than others. And the main thing is that since they're open source projects, there are developers out there that propose protocol upgrades or changes to the code base. And there has to be some organization around what actually gets updated into these protocols. And the best run protocols like Bitcoin do this by making the entire network of nodes that we talked about at the beginning agree. But some of these coins have a much more insular, small group of people that just kind of control the code base. And they're like, hey, the three of us think this would be a great, upgrade to the protocol. And so we're just going to do it. And then maybe we're going to issue ourselves some coins as a reward, right? And that's why some of these things are totally scammy. So you have to look at like the issuance of the coins, and is there a founder's reserve, and what venture capital firm got like some discount on those coins to get into them? Because there are currencies that are not really decentralized, and they claim to be cryptocurrencies, but really they're just like investment schemes.
Gotcha.
Wow. Well, I know you guys got to go. We're coming up on a hard time. Real quick, if someone wants to buy, how should they get involved? How do they buy cryptocurrency?
General recommendation, and this isn't a recommendation for a particular platform, I just find the user interface experience the easiest, is Coinbase. Go on Coinbase, register your information. It's going to freak you out because they're looking for anti-money laundering, know your customer information. So the first time you have to put your passport in and all your personal information, it's because it's a financial instrument and they've got to collect it. But for me, the easiest way is on an exchange like that. And then if you're not comfortable moving it off the exchange to where you own the keys, keep it on the exchange. That is not the school solution. Do your own research. That leaves it vulnerable. But for the majority of people who don't want to absolve that first party risk, that's probably the easiest, most straightforward, easiest user interface. But there's Coinbase, Kraken, and Binance, and there's a gazillion different exchanges out there that you can do this on. Alec, what would you say for a complete noob type?
Yeah, I 100% agree for a noob. The kind of like anarchist in me says that you're just contributing to the degradation of the whole ethos of crypto by going to a central repository to get it. But if you wanted to go out and kind of be an anarchist about it and use like localmonero.com or Bisq or HODL or some of these platforms that are no KYC and super shady, it's going to be way more work. And so I would go the easy path. And if you're like, hey, I really want to get into this, I want to be with the anarchists, go and you can explore that later, because it's super unforgiving and your chances of doing it wrong greatly increase the more you get outside of those core, regulated services, and Coinbase is probably the number one.
Awesome. I mean, Alex, Charles, I've been watching Will take copious amounts of notes over there.
Yeah.
I know this is recorded, so I can re-listen to it, which I will probably several times. I really appreciate the information. Awesome time. I think we could spend days and
probably
days
another hour or two
this.
easily. Yeah.
But awesome, man. Love having you guys on. Thank you. Thanks for the information.
Hey, and for what it's worth to the group out there, I am on LinkedIn. If anyone has any questions, if you want help buying it, storing it, anything like that, I'm going to charge you a few bucks. But I really believe in the adoption of it. And anything I can do, that was my main motivator behind the education I provide and the services I provide, is just, it makes a lot of sense for the right people. It's scary to start with. And so having someone you trust and know that can hold your hand and help you get started and get you, sort of push you out of the nest, I love doing that.
Charles, can you just put out to our listeners out there where they can find you, email address or company?
Your website or
our website address, not your email address.
For me, best place to hit me up is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I just because of the nature of a lot of stuff I do, I don't have a shingle out. Gotcha. Sort of like the A-team. If you can find me, I do really cool things and solve a lot of problems, but I'm not on billboards.
Gotcha.
He does. I agree. Charles solves problems. If I can do 90 seconds on
please,
on my soapbox here. So, because I know a lot of your listeners, come from the USG or military community, right? Mm-hmm. Like Bitcoin and many cryptocurrencies are like espousing essentially American values, right? Of sovereignty and freedom and liberty and individualism. So like this whole thing of where like a lot of USG is like, I don't know what form to fill out so we can use that. We need to get past that, right? China just gave up on it. So let's make this a Western technology. Let's encourage it. Let's get developers in. Let's, make appropriate regulations that, are the minimum necessary, and figure out ways that we can kind of leapfrog ahead of other countries that are basically taking advantage of their technological advantages right now, to leapfrog ahead of us and make the dollar and Bitcoin US flavors of monetary value. And so we've always been the reserve currency, or not always, but in recent history, we've been the reserve currency, and we don't need to compete with Bitcoin. Like, we can embrace it and bring it in. And so like, if listeners are in government or talking to government contractors, right, just like make the case, evangelize. Because this is really like this right now, this summer, when China gave up on it and just kind of like pushed it off, is when the West needs to claim it. Right. This is a global technology, but we can be influencing it. So, it's not something to be afraid of. Use it. Like, there's a ton of interesting use cases that are offensive and defensive. And so investigate those. And if you have an opportunity to talk to a regulator or talk to an element that has a tactical reason to use it, do that. And if you have questions about that, Charles and I will help, right? Like, anyone who was curious about how the US could possibly take advantage of Bitcoin is a friend.
Dude, that's the tagline right there, right? It's the tool of liberty, freedom, privacy in America. That was awesome, Alec.
I love it. China can have Afghanistan. We'll take cryptocurrency.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Guys, thanks a lot. It was awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
See y'all next week.